ICQ Podcast, episode 247, PiStar. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 247th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported by Alexander Ziger, Mike 0 Sierra Uniform Victor, Anthony Mark Tilt and Phil Stevenson, Kilo 0 Papa Whiskey Sierra, and of course our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB W9ICQ is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest Amateur Radio news. Myself, Colin, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on PiStar. Well, as always, it's our donors that keep us advert-free in the podcast show, and we've got 3 listeners to thank this episode. We'd like to thank Anthony Mark Tilt for his donation, Alex Ziger, Mike 0 Sierra Uniform Victor, who says, nice podcast and is enjoying it, so thank you, Alex, for keeping us advert-free. And Phil Stevenson, Kilo Oscar Papa Whiskey Sierra. He sent us a little note long saying he's happy to help us out. He's a frequent listener to the show and he really looks forward to enjoying each episode. The guys on the roundtable present a variety of news stories he finds in a casual and informative way, and he always appreciates that. And he said the technical in-depth features as well is certainly something that he looks forward to. He appreciates all the effort of the whole team and what we do to help promote, say, the amateur radio hobby. So he's helped us out with an annual subscription donation, which is greatly appreciated, because certainly feel those donations help pay our way and give us a great base, as I say, in paying our fees. So he's 73s, and he's wished me as well a good holiday trip to London, which I've just returned from. Some of you guys would have seen postings to the Facebook group of us at the Milton Keynes rally. There are a few pictures there of the rally at the on the Facebook group, so check those out if you haven't done so already. Well, as I say, it's great to get the donations in from the 3 guys this episode, but as I say, unfortunately we still need to pay our way going forward. So as I say, if you enjoy the show and what we're doing, we'd ask you to consider us by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send our way is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Chris, Martin, Dan and Ed to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including digital modes for foundation level and ARDF record at YOTA 2017. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 247 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Today I'm joined by the guys. I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Yeah, hi guys, how you doing?
Hi, yeah, Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB5NU. No, it isn't.
KB6NU.
I just moved you down to KB6NU. And Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL.
Good evening.
Hi, mate. And I'm also joined by Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Or DN5LP.
Are you
just to confuse you.
Me now, aren't you?
No, that's my
What's
teacher's...
What's your new call sign, Martin? M2MRB?
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So what's
that's my teacher's license.
All right. Okay. You have a separate license in Germany for that as well, then, do you?
Yep.
Oh, live and learn. Live and learn. Okay. Well, apart from me moving down to a different part of the States, sorry about that, Dan.
It's all right.
We will continue. Ed, you spotted this Aries interview on the ARRL newsline talking to the radio station that's giving out the public service information, didn't you? So do you want to cover this one first?
Yeah, okay. It's actually this week's extra release of the ARRL news podcast. All it is actually the recording of an interview between the talk radio station WGMD and the ARRL South Texas Section Public Information Officer for ARES, ARES, Mike Ulrich, KA5CVH. And it's just saying about what's going on for the tropical storm Harvey from an amateur radio point of view, and also covering in general how amateur radio helps. And just wanted to give a plug to in this case, the ARRL News podcast. that they've covered this, and it's actually very much worth listening to this interview. I think Mike Ulrich has done a very good job for amateur radio publicity in this. I've created a short URL, so if anybody wants to look at this, it's tinyurl.com/ARRL Harvey. So Alpha Radio Radio Lima, Hotel Alpha Radio Victor Echo Yankee. And that will get you to the website on the ARRL website. But you can also look for this on iTunes, Stitcher, Blueberry, and all the other podcatcher sites. Just look up ARRL News Podcast.
Yeah. Well, the ARRL do a good job of reading the news, and as I say, that's very, very relevant. Dan, I know it's your side of the pond, and I know you corrected my geography and said you're about 1,000 miles north of all this was going on. Any fallout from your part of the world on this, or?
Oh no, we're totally unaffected. But I had an interesting experience. So we have a net here on Sunday nights on the local 2-meter repeater, and we have an Echolink connection. And one guy regularly checks in from Houston, WD0BCF, and he actually checked in on Sunday night via Echolink. And fortunately, at that point in time, he was still in his home and doing okay. I haven't heard from him since, but it was interesting to get a first-hand report.
Yeah. Well, it certainly focuses the mind if it's somebody you know in an area where it's being battered by a storm or a hurricane. So, it makes it that little bit more personal. But let's hope not only him, but everybody in Texas and the southern states, hopefully you got through this one okay, and hopefully too many of you didn't lose too much there. So, Chris, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I can only sort of echo really what you were saying. Hopefully, doesn't cause too much damage. There's not people lose their lives and things, or injuries and things, and hopefully things get back to normal very quickly for the folks, and they aren't too affected. And it's nice to see the amateur radio community helping out once again when we have these sorts of incidents.
Yeah, very much so. Martin, we don't have hurricanes and that over in this country at the moment. Who knows?
Well, hopefully not. Not since about 1987.
Well, we might do if we get global warming, but let's say another good story for amateur radio, I suggest.
Oh, absolutely. It's great publicity for amateur radio. It's good that the service is there, that we have the people with the skills and the ability to set up these networks. Let's face it, we all know when all else fails, amateur radio. We've got another story coming up a little bit later. Again, amateur radio in times of emergency. There is still very much a need for for amateur radio in 2017.
Yeah, certainly is. And as I say, as Ed's recommendation, well worth having a listen to this one. So.
And obviously, our thoughts do go out to anybody affected in the area that may have suffered damages or losses.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Moving on, Digital Sign of the Times is the headline, and this is kind of a look at digital, what's going on digitally in Australia, the UK and the US. And Dan, do you want to go first on this one?
Oh, sure. So now we're talking here in the U.S. about extending some privileges to technician class licensees. And one of the proposals is to offer them more digital privileges on the HF bands. And it seems to make sense to me. We're letting them use CW, and that may or may not be such a great incentive to get on HF anymore. And digital modes seem to be the mode du jour, and I'd be for it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that's pretty good. Chris, in the UK, our foundation licence holders pretty much get all modes up to 77s, don't they? So,
and of course, the fact digital modes are very efficient means actually you don't need an awful lot of power often to be able to get long distances. So, for us, digital modes are, I think, very useful. People that have restrictions on the amount of power they're allowed to run. So, yeah, I know when we spoke to Ian Shepherd over in Friedrichshafen about the exam review and what's happening with the foundation license, there was talk about, rather than doing a practical around Morse code, perhaps actually having practical assessments for the foundation actually use some digital modes, so kind of bringing things up to date. So I thought that was quite interesting, and we'll see where that ends up when that review is published, and we get to find out what's happening in the future for that assessment.
Yeah. And not only, I mean, digital modes doesn't only mean sort of typey. There's digital voice in the Martin. I mean, you're the repeater keeper for GB3XP. We put digital voice through that all the time, don't we?
There's digital voice going through that most of the time. There's a huge following for digital stuff going through there at the moment, alongside the analog stuff as well. But I was a bit surprised at this. I thought, oh, hang on, this is included in Foundation already. But obviously we're not specifically talking about the UK. But I do remember learning about things like D-Star, JT65 and SSTV when I did my Foundation. But that may have just been something that they were talking about at the club where I did my Foundation. But as Chris said, it's great for Foundation license holders because they can use gateways and reflectors. Whereas, if they're limited by 10 watts of power, you can get on the air with 10 watts or less into a gateway, and you can talk to someone on the other side of the world. And it helped, I think, if nothing else, it will help them keep the bug, hopefully. And with youngsters coming into the hobby that, let's face it, they're all permanently attached to smartphones and things like that and their tablets. Well, it can only be a good thing because it's just an extension of that, really, isn't it?
Certainly is. Well, Ed, you lived in Australia for a long while, and you know more about the Australian situation. I believe that Foundation licenses holders in Australia don't actually get any digital modes or something, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, this article that we're discussing is actually based around some comments and discussion from Jim Linton, VK3PC. And he actually says that a number of European countries considering entry-level licenses with proposed inclusion of digital modes. The UK Foundation license has permitted some digital modes since the outset, but in Australia, no. There is no, under the Foundation license, you are not allowed to operate any digital data modes or digital voice modes. So, D-Star, no. PSK31, no. Free DV on the HF bands, no. If you've got a Foundation license, you need to move up to the standard or intermediate license before you can use digital modes in Australia, and that's one of the things I want to change. I think what's behind this article a lot is also what the other Martin just said. A lot of the younger people coming into the hobby or looking at the hobby, considering it, are coming from a background perhaps of some computer coding, some operation of digital data modes in networks, or even controlling quadcopters and drones, etc. And there's something that it would be good if they had the advantage to experiment further with that, i.e. at higher powers with bigger antennas, longer range, etc. Even under the restriction of maybe 10 watts output under a Foundation license, rather than having to jump through some more hoops to get to the next license before they're allowed to do it. And as we've said, in the UK, it seems that there's always been some amount of digital modes allowed. In Australia, there isn't. And Dan, did you say that over there at the moment the technician is or isn't allowed digital data modes?
Oh yeah, technicians can do anything above 50 megahertz.
But not on HF.
No, not on HF. Sorry.
Okay. And I think that's mainly what we're talking about here as well. On the data side, it's HF we're talking about, because as most of us know, 5 or 10 watts of JT65, FT8, PSK31, and you can talk around the world, at some point in time of the day with a bit of luck. And whereas, sideband, you probably wouldn't manage that at the moment.
At the moment. But all in all, it's an interesting look at digital modes and what people can and can't do. And let's say, as our hobby, it's one of the things I always find quite strange is that different parts of the world have different rights, and slowly we'll all come together. I know we have 3 regions. My guess is in another 10, 15 years, this will all joined up quite seamlessly. But hopefully, anyway. Moving on, Dan, you put this one in for us. The ARRL finally realised this status quo isn't going to cut it. And it talks about, they need to have a vision, don't they? So I'll let you go first on this one, Dan.
Yeah, so there's an item in the board meeting minutes of the July ARRL board meeting, which I found really fascinating, actually. There's a report on a committee that was formed to identify challenges facing the ARRL and possible solutions. And the key sentence is, from the committee's vantage point, the status quo is no longer adequate. We need to have a vision for the future and convey it to our current membership. And this is the first time I've actually heard them say, the status quo isn't really adequate. And that, to me, that's like a big leap forward.
Yeah. But do you not think that, should this not come from the membership rather than, and I'm not getting anybody particular in the ARRL, but if you're sitting in your ivory tower, you've been licensed for 40, 50 years, the hobby's moved on.
Well, right. And so that's the second part of that sentence there. Yeah. We need to have a vision of the future and convey it to our current membership. To me, that's going about it all wrong. They really need to involve not only the current membership in this, but all the licensed radio amateurs they can pull into this and form a vision for the future. If they try and do this just at HQ, I think it's going to be a real failure.
Yeah. Well, visions tend to change. You start off and it has to be, monitored and reviewed every so often, I would suggest. Martin, what do you think?
To be honest with you, I've not got a lot to add on this. They're obviously realising that the status quo isn't going to cut it. It's the fact that they're waking up and realising it. Hopefully, it's going to push them to do more for the hobby, and can only be a good thing going forward, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Ed, do you got any comments on this one?
No further comments on that. I think it's something we're seeing across a lot of the national societies around the world, RSGB, WIA, and now the ARRL are realising it's time for change.
I think change for the good. I think Chris, and bring you in last on this one, but I think the RSGB have done a good job in the last few years by setting up the youth committee and the youth board so that we're actually got under 25s involved and doing things. And I'm certainly seeing a lot more involvement and wanting to change from the top level people. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Yeah, certainly. When we spoke to the RSGB a couple of years ago during previous album, they were absolutely really keen on this idea of youth. If you listen back to the episodes then when we spoke to the general manager and the president, they were absolutely determined around the youth agenda. Back to Dan's point about the ARRL, I think it needs to be inclusive. So I think I agree with you, Dan. It needs to be something that the membership engaged and involved in, not just dictated to by people that think they know better. So I'm with you on that one, Dan.
Well, hopefully, and we're not having a dig at the ARRL, but hopefully listen to your membership, involve them. If you give your membership what they want, your membership will grow. If you don't give the membership what they want, things fall apart. And it's exactly the same with what we've done with our club. We've given the members what they want, and we're a growing club. So, as I say, listen to your members. That's all I'd say.
And perhaps if the ARRL do this as well, and if this works for them, maybe there'll be some other national bodies in other countries that might think, maybe we need to think about this as well.
Yeah. So it's a worldwide thing, I would suggest. So I agree with you. Moving on, Susan, PD3SZN, established an ARDF record at YOTA 2017. And we were up there running around, Martin, weren't we? We interviewed the ARDF guys, one of which we know quite well, being Mr. Dennis Snow, and the other guy was Eric, and I'm sorry, Eric, I can't remember his surname, but they were setting the course, weren't they, at the time?
They were. I mean, it's we didn't get to have a go at this, but we've done ARDF in the past, and it's always good fun. But we're only doing it in a relatively small area with perhaps 3 2-meter transmitters that have been hidden, but they were doing 2 meters and on 80 meters. To me, 80 meters is impressive how you do that, but obviously they've done well. So congratulations to them. It's nice. It's one of these parts of the hobby when you can actually get the opportunity to run around as well. A lot of people picture amateur radio, people just sitting behind a desk in a shack or something like that, but it doesn't have to be. So this just proves that you can be out running around in a field looking for little hidden transmitters as well. It's always great fun. So glad they enjoyed it, and congratulations to them.
Yeah, I think it was fun. Chris, I think you've done ARDF with us as a club thing, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have, and it's great fun. Well done to Susan for the record on the establishing it within sort of world record time. You got to say, when I tried it, it was being very inexperienced. I think I've done it twice now. It's actually quite hard because you only get a few seconds of the transmission, and you've got to try to figure out what direction it's in, and you're sort of running around. Then you've got to wait for the next time it transmits, maybe a few minutes later, and you find you're in completely the wrong place. So actually being able to do it in record time is actually quite a skill. So she's done very well. So yeah, very impressive.
And just as a side note here, the Dutch team actually got first place in the 2 meter hunt. So, that was super impressive all round. Ed, you ever been involved or got, in ARDF? I keep wanting to call it by its old name, and I know the boys don't like this, but certainly, somebody who rushes round the fastest lady and that, really good, I would suggest.
Yeah, I mean, compliments to Susan and also to the Dutch team. They did very well. And yeah, I mean, ARDF tends to be, and I think it's defined as being on foot in a laid out course, often through forests or open land. And I believe for YOTA, that worked very well on 2 meters, but on 80 meters, they would have preferred to have a bigger area, just because, their wavelength and whatever to get the stations through. But what I remember from, and I haven't been involved in this, I do remember as part of my club membership at a local Hull District Amateur Radio Society many, 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 many years ago, we used to do, and I'm going to say fox hunts, because that's what we called them then. And they were in cars, though. So, you'd do a trig point and, a triangulation of where somebody was and slowly hunt them down, or a hidden transmitter or whatever. And whereas ARDF relies quite a lot on orienteering and healthy legs. So I don't think I'm going to be competing against anybody particularly in ARDF.
But it's fun. It's fun. Dan?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think on this one?
I was kind of wondering how they train for this. I mean, I suppose they can jog around and improve their athletic ability that way. But I mean, are there like coaches that think up like different puzzles that then they go run around and try and find those transmitters? I mean, that would be interesting to know.
Well, the training certainly would be interesting to know. I mean, in fairness, all of us are over the age of 25. Let's put it that way. Let's keep it that far. But all of us are over the age of 25, and these are all young, fit people that could run around. So, they'd have been around quicker than the ICQ team we have here today, put it that way. I assume they must sort of train, the running and that sort of thing, and I assume they have to do lots of practice hunts, which would certainly hone their skills. So, it's a part of the hobby that's interesting. I've done it a couple of times. Not very good at it, but then I haven't spent enough time trying to get good at it, I suppose. But sounds fun.
I may have to.
Sorry.
I may have to research this and write a blog post about it.
Yeah,
Training for the ARDF championships.
Yeah.
One thing about the ARDF, okay, this was only the one at YOTA, but the proper ARDF championships, they actually have age groups. So you can quite often get somebody in their 70s and 80s, maybe not running around, but walking around competing with people of his own age or her own age. taking part in ARDF as well. And I think these things start as club events, and then if you're good, you move on to your regional event, and then your national event, and then the international events. So, it's a proper competition sports structure.
Yeah. And it's just another interesting part of our hobby, which makes our hobby, worthwhile doing. And for those of us who duck in and out and just have a bit of a play, we have some enjoyment. For those who take it seriously, they obviously get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So, as I say, but very good news that the Dutch team won it. We congratulate them, and we congratulate Susan for being the fastest one to find all 5 transmitters on 2 meters. So that was good.
The fastest lady.
Fastest lady, yeah. So there you go. Moving on, we have when dings and dongs go wrong, and it's talking about a problem in, it says here, Londonderry. Colin will tell me it's Derry. Depending on what part of Ireland you come from, you either pronounce it Londonderry or Derry. But there was a stuck doorbell on operating in 70 SEMS that was creating all sorts of problems for people trying to open and shut their cars because of the car frequencies on that. So, bit of a naughty one. Martin, do you want to go first? Because I know you've got quite strong feelings on this sort of thing.
Oh, geez. I have got absolutely no sympathy. I mean, okay, I've got a car. I don't know what frequency the key fob for my car works on. It's probably the same frequency, but 433.92 is the frequency that we are talking about here, which is effectively used by wireless devices, key fobs, alarm things, remote controls for cranes, everything. Every man and his dog are operating at 433.92, low range, few milliwatts, that sort of thing. And we had a problem some time ago when our local 70 SEMS repeater was constantly transmitting, because obviously it's a repeater, 25 watts, and it was flattening the front end of car key fobs at a rather expensive garage over the road, and apparently the people at that garage were particularly nasty about it, because obviously it showed them up for using cheap parts that didn't have filtering, and were using perhaps these frequencies when there were other frequencies available for it. So in here I have little sympathy for it. I don't see why they don't invest in things like that operate at around 868 megs, which is another license-free area, or put a little bit more filtering on it. Spend the money.
Yeah, well, I think most of the cars are on the 433 segment.
But a lot of them used to reuse infrared. They had little infrared blips on their thing, which you wouldn't get really any interference from, I wouldn't have thought.
No, but when they went over to radio, a lot of them went 433, and I've certainly locked myself out of vehicles or not had things working and transmit. You could sit in a car park with your 70 SEMS 1 watt handheld and stop people getting into their cars.
I have sat in my office car park operating through a repeater, which I think I was transmitting 430 into the repeater, and people in my car park at work, I've sat there and watched them trying to get in their car and thinking, well, yeah, that's 3 megahertz away, or nearly 4 megahertz away.
Yeah, these receivers are like wide as a barn door. Chris, what do you think on this one?
I think it's unfortunate. I think we've all got to play together, and clearly, if these are not particularly well designed and are affected by things that are a number of megahertz away, then obviously there's issues there. Whether you'd ever get a car manufacturer to actually admit that it's their fault, or I doubt if the average garage mechanic would have a first clue about RF and how that would work. So it's a bit unfortunate. The general public are not going to have the first idea about what frequency has been used by their car remote control, and it's going to try and blame whoever is transmitting. But I think it does raise a point around not relying on these things, not relying, keep things simple. So I think you were saying previously, Ed, before we started recording, about what's wrong with having a key with you put in the lock and turn it as a backup. I think you'd always need to have some sort of backup system, so you shouldn't be relying on pressing a key fob to get in your car. If there's a problem, there needs to be a way of getting around that. There needs to be backup that you can use So yeah, you should never be locked out of your car and speaking. You know, someone transmitting on a particular frequency. You should never get locked out of your car because of that. You need to have a backup. You need to have, like I say, a key or something that lets you in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in there. That's exactly when I first read this. I went, and apparently one of the women that was complaining from some sports centre or something said, "Oh, she leaves her car open now because she can't rely on getting into her car otherwise." And I went, "Excuse me, why not just use the old-fashioned metal key that you've got with the car, put it in the little hole on the door and turn it around and lock the door or unlock the door as needed if the RF doesn't work?" But then in the discussion, we said, well, there's some new cars that don't even have that capability now. So that's really crazy. And I'm wondering how many amateurs with the, 35, 40 watt, 70 centimeter FM transmitters built into their cars having problems with key fobs or the car not starting.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are cars now that you can buy that don't have a physical keyhole in it. It's just relying on the RF key fob. So, do you want to buy a car like that? You've got to think about it. It's a bit like my car. I've got a problem where the boot does not have a keyhole. It's only got, you can only operate it from the key fob, and there's nowhere to get into the boot because the back seats don't go down. So if the motorised actuator in the boot ever fails and I can't open it, the boot's locked permanently. So I've actually now got there is actually a cord you can pull from within the boot to open it from inside. I've actually extended that out, tied a piece of cord onto it, so it actually goes into the back seat, so I have actually got away. But the vast majority of owners would never do that, and you end up with people that can never open the boot in the car. So, there is no keyhole there. So yeah, I'm sure there are cars that have no keyhole at all to get in with a key to any part of the car, which means that if you ever get a flat battery, for example, what are you supposed to do? There needs to be a backup, I would suggest.
Yeah, a bit strange. Dan, do you guys suffer the same problem in the States of having stuff on 433 megahertz?
Oh, sure. And in fact, we were talking about cars not having keyholes anymore. My new Ford Edge doesn't have that. Yeah, it does have one of those bars where I can punch in a code, so I can still get in if the key fob's not working for some reason. But there's no real physical way to do it anymore. But having said that, there was a item in the ARRL website a couple of months ago, and maybe even in QST, where there was some very similar problem here, and they actually called in the ARRL to help them find the culprit. And it's very, very similar. They found, some device malfunctioning and were able to figure it out. But they actually called in the ARRL to help them.
Yeah, I read that one actually. So didn't the FCC say they couldn't help, and they ended up calling in the ARRL? They did do a good job, and I think they found the problem, didn't they?
Yeah. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I believe the answer from the FCC was, this is an unlicensed frequency. You're not paying a license for it, so we're not going to give you any service for it. And, on 77s, you've got the primary users, which are often military, the secondary users, they're often amateur, and the third users are unlicensed. And as far as the FCC, on that particular report, my understanding was they said, we're not responsible for that.
And they really aren't. Like you guys have said, it's really up to the auto manufacturer.
Well, I think the interesting one was that Ofcom flew two of their engineers out to Northern Ireland to investigate this problem. Now, they obviously would have known it was something to do with the car receivers, something on 77s, based on their knowledge, because a lot of Ofcom people are also amateurs. However, they flew them out there to fix a problem, an interference problem, on the license-free part of the band.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question then? Now,
because what you like.
I live, as a number of us do, in London, and we are not permitted to use 431 megs within 100 miles of Charing Cross, I think. And
60 miles,
there are limitations on power if you are further away on 431.
Yeah.
It's interesting that 433.92 is obviously something that is widely used, rightly or wrongly, by many manufacturers, be they doorbell cars, whatever. And yet there are no restrictions saying you can't go there. If I wanted to, technically, There's nothing in my license that says I couldn't tune to 433.92 and then call someone and have a chat on it. Yeah. Okay, you're not supposed to cause interference, but I might not knowingly be causing interference. If it wasn't for this story, I wouldn't have necessarily even known that was where the frequency was.
Yeah, so
other than these funny little blips that you hear, but you hear them all over 77s all the time.
Yeah, so you call, it's the frequency in use. You don't hear anybody calling back.
Exactly.
The key fob isn't going to tell you anything in voice, is it?
No, you just hear little
your
squirts.
Frequency. They should move off.
Exactly, and you can't even decode it. The things are not on the air long enough for you to even recognise it as data. It's a blip. It could be a sproggy coming, a bit of interference coming off of someone's thermostat or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
is it down to Ofcom to perhaps say, actually, guys, you need to not use this frequency?
Yeah, I mean, the license-free frequencies should not be within the amateur band. Full stop.
Exactly.
But
good luck getting them to move it, though.
But you won't get them to move it. But the other thing is, the worst thing about this is that the receivers in cars are about as wide as a barn door.
Yeah.
3 megs away will still flood the receiver. 3, 4, 5 megs away, your chances are you'll flood the receiver and it'll stop working. Now, it's not only there's doorbells on there, there's the car opening systems, there's weather stations, there's all sorts of stuff transmits in the 77 band in the UK. And as I say, there is actually license-free handy-talkie frequencies in the amateur band as well. They're allowed 10 milliwatts, and I think they're down fairly close to our 77's repeater inputs. And when I worked for a radio dealer, he's like, "Oh, we can use those frequencies." Oh, well, don't worry about the 10 milliwatts. Let's shove 5 watts. And I went, "You were having a laugh, mate. There's no way I'm doing that." But they were quite happy to. They were, if I wasn't a licensed amateur, they might have broke the rules and put 5 watts out in the amateur bands, interfering with their repeaters. So I think there's ignorance around, and poor quality in that the radio receiver for this unlocking system in a car is not the best receiver in the world. So I think
it's interesting that Ofcom went out to investigate interference to effectively key fobs, as you mentioned, license-free devices. Yet you tune around the 77s band here, and I mentioned this. I heard this happen on the Farnham repeater the other day. You mentioned you were experiencing the Amersham repeater as well. You're getting interference, sort of interference, and you can hear this stuff coming through. Well, technically, that's interference that we're suffering. Are they going to investigate where that stuff's coming from? Because I bet that's a crane or something.
If somebody reported it, they possibly would.
Okay.
I was probably a bit lazy. I didn't report it this week.
Because I've had that on those particular repeaters. I've had that for a long time. Now I don't know. Perhaps in the area. I mean, I'm quite a way away from both of those repeaters. But perhaps when in the local area where they are, they're not as affected. Maybe that interference is coming from something a lot more local to me. I don't know. But it'd be interesting to see what the reaction to that would be.
Well, maybe we need to do a report on that. Yeah. Moving on, this one went fairly viral over the internet. Emergency call via GB3WR by M6MGE and G6ASK. Obviously got the emergency services out to a young lady that was suffering a violent fit, I believe. Chris, you put this one forward. Do you want to go first?
Yes, this is a great story. So this is a good example of, someone doing something good. So this young lady, May, who was having a cluster seizure, which apparently went on for over an hour, which is quite serious apparently, needed some help. Someone, I think they were out in the middle of some lakes, I'm trying to think now. And
near Exmouth.
Yeah, one of the people that she was with, John, G6ASK, they were trying to. In fact, this story's gone out, by the way, on the mainstream media nationwide in the UK. So it's got lots of positive publicity for the hobby. So John reported that he wasn't able to get any sort of phone signal on any of the networks or anyone's phone that was there. So I hopped out to his car, jumped on to the repeater, and was able to talk to Mike. who happen to be monitoring the repeater, Mike M6MGE. There is a recording you can listen to, or it's actually a video, sorry, on YouTube you can play, which I'm sure we will put a link to on the show notes. And Mike took the call. The recording doesn't start right at the very start. He sort of sits record when he can. He dials 999 and he relays information between the 999 operator, which is the same as 911 in the US. Was able to relay information from the ambulance service through to John and back again. So they were able to get information about young May and what was happening with her. And quite quickly, the emergency responders turned up and were able to help her. May. And what's good news is that May has now made a full recovery, and that's all great news. And I actually had an interview on BBC Radio 2, which is a national radio station, with both Mike, John, May, and the fire service responder that turned up and went through the story. So it was really good publicity for the hobby. And I've got to say, Mike, and if you're not familiar with the UK call signs, Mike with an M6 call sign is actually a foundation license holder, so kind of entry-level license. He did an amazing job. It just proves that you don't need to have, his operating skills are really, really good. He was able to convey the message really clearly, back and forth between the ambulance service and John, and he did a really, really good job. And it just sort of proves you don't need to have a full license to be able to do that. His operating skills were there, and he did a great job, and there was a great result at the end of it.
Yeah, certainly was. Mine, you out and about, and you often tell me you carry a handy talkie with you, same as I do if I go off track anywhere. But what do you think about this one?
Well, congratulations to Mike for stepping in and helping that call, and also to John for having the common sense to take his radio with him. One of the things you should know about this is 999. If you dial 999, the UK emergency number, on a mobile, even if it doesn't have a SIM card in the UK, it will connect via any network, even a rival's network, because it's recognised as a mobile call. If you're out in the middle of the sticks and you can't dial 999, then obviously you have no coverage at all. So again, we go back to the thing, when all else fails, amateur radio. We often take, if ever we go walking along coastal paths where we're away from a town, perhaps we're walking the Lake District, somewhere like that, I've always got a radio in my pocket, tuned into the local repeaters as well. Emma's got a radio as well from the exact point of view, although she's not licensed in the times of emergency. I'll take my chances, thanks very much. So we have the ability to call for help if need be. This can only be a good thing. It obviously raises the profile of amateur radio to 999 crews, so they understand what's going on. I'm sure they've all been made aware of this, but I wonder how many people, if you were sitting there and you heard on your local repeater someone asking for help, how many people were listening that were perhaps a bit wary of this and perhaps a bit, I don't know if I want to do this. There's part of you thinking you should, but am I going to get in trouble from the 999 crew? This guy just called and fortunately was able to help. And I think if someone does genuinely hear a distress call, you should go back to them regardless. Go back to them, offer what help you can. If they need you to call 999, call 999. Tell them who you are. Tell them why you're calling. What the messages that you've had received, and I'm sure they will thank you for it, because you could potentially save a life, as clearly Mike did, of this girl, May. Yeah,
agree with you totally. Dan, you were saying that it even made it across the pond to you. You spotted it on social media.
Right. I saw this on Twitter, and I agree with that, dear. I think that it's a good reminder that perhaps we should be monitoring. If you're in your shack, be monitoring the local repeaters. You never know when something can come up, and be ready to help.
Yeah. I say, I think most people would respond and help out. And amateurs are usually fairly social people, so I'm sure they would. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, very little to add except from the conversation we had before starting the recording. It appears that Mike had a bit of a challenge with the 999 operator as well, to make her understand who he was, why he was calling. He wasn't at the site where the problem was, but he had another independent communication mode to get to those people. Right. So I think, as Chris or Martin said, there's a little bit of re-education required, or a bit of education required for those on the 999 desk to understand that when somebody calls in and says they're an amateur radio with a message of an emergency, then basically trust them and go with it, because I think Mike had a bit of a job to convince this young lady who he was and why he was and what was going on.
Yeah, that wasn't quite what happened. So, having heard the recording, I mean, yeah, I don't think it was an issue at all with him getting the message across. It was more at the end of the call. The lady was just asking, what company he worked for. She didn't realise that really what amateur radio was, and he had to explain that this was a hobby. He wasn't working for a company. It wasn't like a radio system that was part of a job. It was just that he was doing it as part of a hobby. Apparently, he was, and I think you were saying, Dan, about listening to your repeater. He had his radio on in the background, heard the call come through to say, "Can anybody help?" And that's when he jumped on the radio and made contacts. And apparently, he was 70 miles away, so it also shows that repeaters can be really useful if you want to get a message out. And all credit to the people that put on the repeater GB3WR, which you actually hear the ident actually on the recording going through. So yeah, well done to the repeater people that put that repeater on, because that, again, without having that repeater available, there's no way that from 70 miles away, I don't think that contact would have been as easy as it was. Although saying that, it was still quite crackly. So Mike did a great job of actually, if you actually listen to the recording, some of the responses, and I don't know how well the recording comes through, but he's able to pick out, using his skills as an amateur, what he's hearing, behind all the crackles and the noises. So he actually did a really good job of being able to sort of decipher what was coming through on the radio and pass it through to the operator.
Yeah. I think that was good, mate. That was a good one. Well, as I say, I think that's a nice one to end on. It's a nice warm one that all's well that ends well. So really pleased about that. Right, guys, I normally run around the table quick, talking about what we've been up to. So, guys, let's start with Ed. What have you been up to since we last spoke to you?
Antennas. I've been doing a few other things, but my big news is been working on getting an antenna to work on 80 metres and 60 metres, and I'm a big fan of the guy loop, which is a very simple antenna, full wavelength, fed with a quarter wave of 75 ohm coax, and that's it. It's a very cheap antenna, and I've had a 40 metre one for that. I've used it in Australia, I've used it here, I've used it out on portable sites as well a couple of times. I wanted to get it onto 80 metres. The problem I've got is garden's not big enough, so I had been looking at putting coils and things in it, but that antenna, as soon as you start doing things like that, it doesn't perform anymore. So a couple of days ago, I actually bit the bullet, and I've ended up routing what has ended up looking more like a figure of 8 configuration than a loop or a square. But I've managed to squeeze the full 80 metres, or actually it's about 83 metres of wiring, and got all that working. Not after a couple of problems though. To start with, the antenna analyzer told me I was low in frequency. I said, "Oh great, I can shorten the wire then." So I shortened it all down, and works beautifully on 80 metres. Doesn't work on any other band. I'm thinking this is strange, and I looked at it again and I thought Carter had been right, and I'd gone with the wrong dip on the antenna analyzer. So it was put more wire back into the loop and get it bigger and bigger and bigger till I got the correct dip. And that antenna now works on 80, 60, 40, 30, 20 and 15 meters. So okay, it doesn't cover 17 meters, 12 meters or 10 meters, but it covers most of the bands and looks to be performing pretty well. So yeah, antennas, it was this last couple of weeks.
Sounds good to me. So yeah, well, antennas is often things we play with, but it sounds like you've been very busy, Ed. Martin, what have you been up to? You've been on holiday a couple of times. Did you get any chance to play radio?
I've been on holiday a couple of times, went to the Isle of Wight and went down to Cornwall. I haven't had much of a chance to play radio while I was on holiday. I did have my handhelds with me, so I did give a couple of shout-outs for Edmund. I think I mentioned that on the Isle of Wight repeater, but I don't think it was around when I gave a shout through, but didn't get much of a chance other than that to play while I was on holiday. not been done as much on HF recently either because of the we've had a few lightning storms around. I've been disconnecting the antennas, and I got a bit fed up of reconnecting them and disconnecting them all the time, so I left them out for a little while. But other than that, quite a lot of Fusion. There's quite a lot of people using GB3XP for Fusion access now, which is nice hearing that traffic go through. Playing with D-Stars, I love D-Star. Also been looking in to designs, and I found one that I'm going to have a go at building to build an Arrow style antenna to try and work satellites. So I'm going to have a look at trying to get some parts for that and trying to build that up in the near future. So might need you to pop along on a Monday evening, Martin, with your antenna analyzer when that's done, so we can see what it performs like. And final thing to say, it's SSB Field Day coming up this weekend. I'm going to pop down. Not sure how much I'm going to be able to get along to, but picked up some gas today for the generator, so we're all set for that.
Well, that's good news. That's good news, and glad you enjoyed your holiday. And I know the first week you went. You didn't have a hurricane, but it was pretty blowy.
It was. I was staying in a place called Shanklin on the Isle of Wight. And apparently it made the national news as being the worst hit with winds in the whole of England. And we were staying in a tent, and when we got back, there were two guys hanging onto our tent, trying to reattach it to the ground. Next door's tent already having flipped upside down and all their belongings spread across the campsite. So they were trying to stop that happening to us. So yeah, that was interesting, but fortunately, it's a couple of good Samaritans were able to help us out, and they loaned us a couple of decent tent pegs. Don't ever rely on the little bent bits of metal you get with your tent. Buy some decent ones. Invest in them. It's worth it.
Yeah. So there you go. Bit of advice as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, what have you been up to? You been doing any teaching or writing books or actually been on air?
Well, my next class is until the end of September. But a week and a half ago, I worked the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend with a club on the eastern shore of Lake Huron in Canada. Yeah. And that was a real blast. They treated me like royalty, and I made some CW contacts for them. It's the first time I ever used a call sign other than a U.S. call sign. It was Victor Echo 3 Echo Radio Charlie. It was the Elmira Radio Club. Uh-huh. And like I say, it just was a blast. Weather was good.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. I know Edmund was on that weekend. He was operating from a lighthouse down on the south coast of the UK. And he's posted a YouTube video, but a lot of it was rain, and more rain. So, but that was an interesting one. And I looked at it and thought, yeah, I'd like to take part in that, but the trouble is I'd like to take part in lots of things. Just isn't enough weekends. But
yeah.
But sounds like you have real fun, and using a different call sign is always fun. I know when I put EI or 5B in front of my call sign, it always works well and always sounds fun. So know what you mean.
They asked me back next year, and I've already got it on my calendar.
Sounds brilliant to me, Dan. Sounds brilliant to me. So that's good. And as I say, I take it was a fair amount of socialising going on as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's always good. Right, Mr. Howard, what have you been up to?
Well, you said that Edmund was operating a lighthouse. I actually worked Edmund's on the lighthouse on his call sign GB8SL, which I believe was Shoreham Lighthouse. So I did actually work him during that weekend. And I did actually put a video on YouTube as well, I think, or on Facebook. I can't remember now. So I did actually get a recording of that, which is great fun. So it sounded like Edmund had a very busy weekend, and I'm sure he'll tell us all about it when he's on the next episode. So that was good. I finally got my data modes working on my radio. So I spent a long time looking at YouTube. So I've got this Yaesu FTDX3000, which has a USB connector on the back, and in theory you can just plug that straight into your computer. You don't need any box in between your computer and your radio to interface them. But I could not get it to work at all. I've been looking at various things on the internet on how to do it. Couldn't get it to work, and I thought, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to order a brand new USB, high quality USB cable. So I did that. I got a properly screened one, so it's fairly RF proof. And that worked a treat. So I've now got Whisper working, and FT8 I tried, and PSK31. So I'm now on the air with all that. So that's great. Finally got that working. It was just simply a case of having a decent quality cable. It may have been a faulty cable, or the previous cable did work on other things. So it may have just been the fact I didn't have a good enough, well enough screen cable. So now, I can now fully control the radio. I can do Whisper. So I actually ran Whisper over the weekend and was picked up all around the world. I think the furthest was the Philippines, which was quite impressive for 5 watts. And so I was quite pleased. That all works really well. So finally, I can now operate digital modes anyway, which is great fun. And Martin, SSB Field Day, we are hopefully all set for that. Hopefully the weather's going to be okay. We are camping again overnight for that on this weekend, and hopefully the weather's going to be okay. We don't have what you had with the wind, etc. So always great fun. We haven't got that many floats coming this year, so we might be quite busy, I think. But always great fun, and we'll be operating through the night and trying to get as many points as we can. So listen out, although I suspect. Well, this will come out actually on Sunday morning, so we'll still be on the air. So listen out for our call sign, and I think we're using G7SAC, and you may hear us on the air and give us some points. So there you go. That was it from me, Martin.
Oh, no.
Oh, actually, sorry, one other thing. I don't want to steal your thunder. We were playing with an ARRL, weren't we, Martin, at the weekend?
I'll talk about that in a minute, but you blew something else out.
Go on.
I let you and Matthew down because I couldn't.
Oh, of course. I've been busy, haven't I? Yeah, we went to HS Belfast as well. So, myself and let's go back. We've been very busy, haven't I? A couple of weeks ago now, myself and Matthew M0NJX were on HMS Belfast. So it's quite busy, actually, because it being summer holidays. Lots of families on the ship there. So we did lots of chatting with the public, lots of more certificates with the kids. Always great fun. And, that was another good one. Thanks for reminding me, Martin.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. What have I been up to? Well, I've had Colin over for the last 4 days. He went back yesterday, and he's run me fair ragged but enjoyably. We've been up to all sorts of bits and pieces, including a little bit of operating that I'll come on to in a minute. We did go to, and this was right at the last minute, decided let's go to Milton Keynes. Let's go to Milton Keynes Rally. So we jumped in the car Sunday morning, 90 miles up the road to Milton Keynes Rally. We took the missus with us. We arrived at the go in, and they said £3 a head. And I said, have I got to pay for Mrs. B? She's only going to go and sit in the car. She ain't even interested in this stuff. And the guy looked at me and go, all right, give us £6 then. So we didn't have to pay for Mrs. B, but mind you, she wasn't going to take part in it anyway. And we spent the rest of the day in the Milton Keynes area. We went to the National Computer Museum, which is where we went the other time, Chris. And I took them and showed them the indoor ski slope and the vertical wind tunnel where they do the...
Did you do it this time, Martin?
No, definitely not.
We'll get you in there.
I don't think so. I'm not frightened of it. I just don't see the point of it, you know. But no, I didn't do the vertical wind tunnel either. I could think of better things than spending £55 on for £55 for 2 minutes. Your 2 1-minute goes.
That is excessive for that cost.
I can think of better things spending £50 on, if I'm being honest. I did get a bit stroppy about a week ago, because I did decide that I was going out to play with on 60 metres. And I'm not going to talk too much about this, but we had an antenna from Solar Beams in to have a look at. I know Ed uses one, Chris made one, and Richard sent me one to have a look at, and we'll talk about that in probably a future programme. But the advantage of this one, it had 60 metres, so I got this aerial for 60 metres. Which radio can I use for 60 metres? And it turns out that I decided to use my FT450. And you read the manual and it says, right, just push the memory button, and they're all pre-programmed in there. You know, the 7 channels for the UK are pre-programmed. All you have to do is push the memory button. So I pushed the memory button, nothing. So I factory reset it. I do all the bits and pieces. And I'm just starting to write a stroppy email. And I spoke to Chris, and he had a better thought than me. He looked on the dealer's website who sold it to me, new. And there's a obscure couple of buttons you have to push to put it into UK mode, I believe. So it wasn't in. So it didn't have. It had all the bands, but you couldn't run it on 60 meters channelized because the ROM wasn't in the right for the right region. And I say it was the only place we found it was on the dealer's website. So eventually we get it all together, and we did go out. We play on Monday morning, bank holiday Monday morning, and I guess it's not the best time in the world to have contacts, but we made quite a few contacts. Let's do it that way. I'll talk more about it another day, but it worked very, very well, and sounded just like FM really to me.
You sure you weren't in FM?
Might have been. No. No, seriously.
I was actually really the first contact we had, and I think this might be a future feature, so we don't want to go into it too much. But the first contact we had was almost like running an FM station, and he was in Southampton, and we were in South London, so a good few miles away. And it was like it was literally, I was amazed how far away he was to say how good a quality of signal it was. So yeah, it was very very impressive.
Yeah. So
yeah, on the subject of 60 meters, Canada's supposedly going to get the band now as well, the WRC 15 band, but in addition to the channels that they already have. Well, that's the hope.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll be working into Canada sometime.
Well, it's as I say, at the moment, when I was talking to Yasu, my radio won't have the firmware upgrade that's coming soon, unfortunately. So I've only got the 7 prefix channels in memory, unless I totally
get brave.
wideband it. But seeing as the radio's like a couple of months old, I don't really want to void the warranty on it yet. So I should probably.
If you get the dealer to do that for you, though, then you don't void the warranty, do you?
Don't know. Well,
I think that's the ruling. If you send it back to the dealer and say
it's an approved dealer, yeah,
an approved dealer, yeah, which I'm pretty sure Martin got his from. My understanding is that they do it within the warranty, so to speak.
Yeah. The silly thing is, having worked for a radio dealer and the dealer that I bought it from, I'm more than capable of opening up the thing and removing one resistor or one link, And that's the silly thing. So anyway,
you don't want to pay someone else to do it for you.
Well, I don't see why I should have to.
Exactly.
I'm more than capable of doing it. I might talk to Yasu.
They always used to say that the one thing in your home you can take apart without validating warranty was a computer. And when I worked for a computer dealer, that was the one thing we used to try and convince people to do. If you take it apart, you can fix this yourself. I'd be interested to see how that applies to other devices nowadays.
Yeah. I might
certainly if you can prove you're trained in it.
Yeah, I might talk to the guys at Yasu next time I see them and see what the ruling is on that. Because
I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that that if someone's been tinkering around with a soldering iron, they don't want to. If they just said publicly that you can go away and make changes inside the radio, and someone does something silly, even things like procedures around things like static control. So if you don't have a wrist strap, for example, you could be poking around in there and zapping components. Yeah. I know, for example, with computer equipment, you need to have a certified engineer that's gone through some sort of training and certification to be able to make certain changes on server equipment, for example. So I can sort of see why they do it. They don't want to completely have an open door to say do what you like, because they'll end up having to fix things that people have damaged themselves, but because they don't know what they're doing. So quite how you measure someone's competence in being able to, I know it may be as simple as picking off a diode or something, but how you measure someone's competence and make sure they follow the right procedures to do that is very difficult unless it's done by a certified dealer or certified person.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because there are a number of amateurs in the South London area that I wouldn't let loose with a toolbox on a crystal set. So
I know who you're talking about as well. It's scary.
okay, that's one of them.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what I've been up to. So
Just another note, Martin.
eh?
One of the things you mentioned museums a minute ago, and not directly radio related, but maybe of interest to people. If anybody is heading down to Cornwall at any point in the direction of Land's End, there is the Telegraph Museum down there, which I did pay a visit to, and it's where all the old undersea cables come up, and you can actually see the cables coming up from the beach and into the cable hut, and you can see where they're all terminated in there.
And Mr. Rothwell's gone.
Right on the word terminated.
He terminated himself.
I'm sure the Telegraph
Now
Museum
he's gone.
is a wonderful place to visit. Never been there myself, but I'm looking at the website now. It looks quite interesting. So it sounds like Martin had some fun when he was down there.
Yeah. Looks like-
Isn't there some kind of Marconi museum down that way somewhere as well? Paul Rath or Paul Rith or somewhere?
I believe so. Oh, wait.
Well, we might know when we talk to Martin next time.
We'll do the 73s then, because Martin's gone. So, okay, guys. Well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I'd like to thank Mr. Jan Romanchik, KB6NU. Got it right this time.
Yeah, thank you. 73, guys.
Cheers, Dan. Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Lovely evening as always.
Thanks, mate. Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Another great fun episode for me.
Yeah. And Mr. Martin Rothwell, who just mentioned the word terminate, and Skype got him. So, sorry, Martin. We'll catch up with you shortly and find out what the problem was. 73 all.
73.
73.
73. And he's
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at our news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start off with news of a delivery of recent payloads to the International Space Station, which included 3 CubeSats, which are part of NASA's educational launch of nanosatellites mission. The SpaceX Dragon spacecraft joined the International Space Station on Wednesday, 16th of August, after their 12th commercial resupply mission, which was launched from the Kennedy Space Center complex, as I say. And part of this was a carriage of 32 nanoracks customer payloads to the International Space Station. On the mission was US Army Space and Missile Defense Command and Accolade Maryland Aerospace Kestrel I2 Satellite. The satellite is a technology demonstration seeking to validate the concept of using microsatellites in low Earth orbit to support critical operations. The overall goal is to demonstrate that small satellites are viable platforms for providing a critical path support to operations and hosting advanced payloads. So on the mission, there was 3 satellites which were selected for flight by NASA's CubeSat launch initiative as part of 22nd installment of the educational launch of nanosatellite missions, and they were sponsored by various people as part of a NASA launch program. The most interesting probably part of the whole project is a project by the Boy Scouts of America, sponsored by the Center of Advancement for Science in Space, and it's their first ever experiment in space by the group. The Scouts of Troop 209, a part of the Pathway to Adventure Council based in Chicago, are seeking to better understand how bacteria functions in space and why virus patterns in space different from those on Earth. So certainly a lot of information on this launch, and as always, I know everybody who works CubeSats and small satellites in space will know how important these are. So certainly good for us and our hobby that, as I say, we're getting more payloads up there along the way. The 7163 group have announced the Protect the Galapagos Islands Wildlife DXpedition to Isabella Island, SA004. The group will be active using the call sign HD8M for Mike, Hotel Delta 8M for Mike, from Isabel Island between the 14th to the 21st September 2017. Activity will primarily be operating on between 160 to 6 metres using CW single sideband and digital modes, primarily using FT8. The group operators will include Jim, Whiskey Bravo 2, Romeo Echo Mike, Nancy, Kilo Golf 0, Yankee Lima, David, Hotel Charlie 5, Delta X-Ray, Ellis, November 1, Mike Whiskey Juliet, and Mark, Whiskey Yankee 1 Golf. Usual QSLs by the club's log or direct with Jim, Whiskey Bravo 2, Romeo Echo Mike. We've got a link on the ICQ podcast website, though, for more information about how those will be done, and also for the DXpedition. You can check that out by visiting icqpodcast.com. And great news as well, from this month, September, Estonia will be joining the 16-metre club, where regular access will be given to Estonians in Class A and B from the 1st September. The band segment allows maximum power, according to the ITU Rule 5.133b, and that band will be from 5351.5 to 5366.5 kHz with a maximum 15 watt EIRP. There's also have the possibility of using the frequency segment of 5370 to 5450 kHz for a maximum of 20 dBWs or 100 watts TX output, but unfortunately so far only on a special mission basis and only for local rescue communications. So as I say, we welcome Estonia as the latest country to join the 60-metre band. Well, now we head over to our features episode, which is a feature on PiStar. As always, guys, hope you enjoy the feature.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, for this feature, I've got an interesting feature for you. It's about PiStar, which is a digital voice application, runs on a Raspberry Pi or similar type single board computer. It's written by a gentleman called Andrew Taylor, M0MWZ. Interesting call sign, almost symmetrical there, Andrew.
Yeah, there's a bit of a story behind that too. So the local radio club here in Blackwood is Blackwood and District Amateur Radio Society, and has the rather excellent call sign of Golf Whiskey 6 Golf Whiskey. And I was so impressed with that call sign that when I actually passed my full license, I was looking to do something similar, and it took me a little bit of time bashing away at the server when I got my ticket through, and Mike Whiskey Zero, Mike Whiskey Zulu was what I came up with.
Yeah, that's a good one. Only ruins it if you come across the border into England, but apart from that, it's an interesting one you wouldn't forget. We also got Mr. Adrian Craig with us. Adrian's M0GLJ. Hi, Adrian.
How are you, Martin?
I'm ducking and diving. I could have used your Australian call sign. I take it's still valid.
No, it's not valid. That expired in 2014.
All right. Okay. Well, you're over here living with us now, so that's all that problem solved. Okay, Andrew, you're the developer of PiStar. I wonder if you can give us a history of the development of it and what your PiStar product actually achieves for us in amateur radio.
Okay, so first of all, I'll give you a brief explanation of what it is, and then I'll get a little bit into the history about where it came from as well. So what it is, it's primarily it's an image for Raspberry Pis to make getting into digital voice more simple, and that'll make a little bit more sense when I talk about history. So it's an entire Linux distribution. It's based on Raspbian. It runs the excellent Jonathan Naylor G4KLX software, both his early works, as in D-Star Repeater, and also the newer MMDVM host. And what that allows you to do is to connect your Raspberry Pi and some sort of hardware that will either be just a modem or a modem and an RF device of some variety, and to connect those together so that you can make anything from a full-scale public repeater to a small pocket-sized node that allows you to use one of the digital modes and connect through the internet to the rest of that network. and in fact allows you to use multiple modes at the same time. We support the big four, so that's DStar, DMR, Yaesu System Fusion, although it's not actually Fusion, I'll get into that in a moment, and P25, which for most of the UK guys, you may not even know P25 exists. Primarily used over in the States by their kind of public services, so fire brigade, police, etc. But it does get some additional use elsewhere too. Now, when I touched on Fusion there, I said it's not quite System Fusion. Well, it's the System Fusion mode, so it's C4 FM, and you can talk to it with Yaesu radios. But it's not YSX, and there is actually an important difference between the two. It does come up that people ask, can I use this system with YSX? And there are some use cases where you can, but for most people, no. There is a separate network that runs on Jonathan's software, so you can speak to other Fusion users, but it's not YSX. And I just want to make sure that that's clear.
All right. Okay. So, I mean, being a Yaesu System Fusion user at the moment, that was interesting to me there, Andrew.
Yeah, there are actually 3 different networks that people might not realize exist. There's the FCS network, which is primarily OpenSpot and DB4 mini dongles. So you have to have one of those two to use that network. And again, that's separate. There's the network that's provided by Jonathan's software, which can be accessed by any repeater or node that uses his software. And then there's YSX. And YSX requires a YSX box and or a Yaesu repeater. Now, there are bridges between some of these networks. So you'll find a room on YSX and a room on the G4KLX software that are connected to each other. And often how that works is that there will be usually an actual Fusion YSX repeater and a small box next to it running maybe PiStar, but often something else that allows to bridge between the two networks. And the bridge is actually often over RF, funnily enough. But that all does work together quite well.
Right. So, I mean, I know that my local repeater and I'm going off a little bit of a tangent, so I won't go too far, runs YSX, but we also hear the DMR traffic come through because there's a bridge or a gateway somewhere that brings them the two together.
Yeah, I'll be honest, one of my concerns for the future of amateur radio, particularly with the digital modes, is that we're coming to a point where there are multiple digital modes and they all have their own network and they all have their own requirements as much as anything else. As you already know yourself, you can't transmit DStar into a DMR repeater. It just doesn't work. They don't understand each other. However, the really good news for all of us is that all of the groups are starting to work much more on working together and bringing bridges together. One of the projects that I've seen recently is the XLX software, which is a replacement for some of the DStar reflectors. So it's the old XRF DStar reflectors are being replaced with XLX reflectors. And there's some very interesting work going on at the moment where there's a bridge between DStar and DMR on an XLX reflector. So more and more we're seeing people join the modes together, which is great.
Well, that's one of the things that I was pleased to start seeing happening, because if you made a big investment in DStar, and DStar radios weren't cheap, you made a DStar investment or a DMR investment early on before they came down to about £99. You made that investment, and you, in my books, I was kind of worried that at some point in time, one of the networks would just be cut off and that would be it.
I agree. I think we're all concerned that we're going to have VHS and Betamax all over again, and one of them will disappear. I think what's great about the ham radio community is that there are many of us that work on these projects that look at the different systems that are out there. And instead of waving the flag for just one of those systems, we go out and we actively push to support all of them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fundamental goals of the PiStar project. It was never going to be just DStar or just DMR or just Fusion. I'm trying to bring all of them together and not to make assumptions about what you might want to connect to. I want to give you all of the choices and ideally let you connect to everything at once.
Right. So you were talking to me earlier about it's a distribution, runs on a single board computer, and you access your control panel to see what's going on via a web address, and you've gave me access to monitor one of yours at the moment, which is actually quite impressive because I'm watching a fair amount of D-Star traffic going through it at the moment. So it gives us a lot of information there.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I've found, and as I said to you when we spoke earlier on, PiStar is a bit older possibly than people realize. I originally started building images for the Raspberry Pi that were actually called PiStar back in 2014. There were a couple of builds before that too, but they were just really for my own use and maybe one other person. But at the time, I didn't have any interest in releasing anything that I was doing. And one of the things that I ran into almost immediately, in fact, back then, was that while I'd spent a lot of time reading everything that I could about Jonathan's software and trying to understand how it interacted with the hardware and how to make the same decisions and how to set up the configuration, something which you look at now and it's not terrifically difficult. There's some fairly good information about the original D-Star software that he wrote. But then it was quite difficult, especially when you're just starting out and just trying to understand. And I realized very, very quickly that, the best thing I could do to help people was to help them with a way to make these decisions without expecting them to have to go and read and find all of the information that I'd already read and had to find. And that meant that either I needed to write a huge instruction manual or I had to take some of the decisions away. And essentially, that's what I did. I did use some other images that were available at the time before PiStar. And with all of them, they tried to make sure that you had a working software distribution that was easy to install, but everything after that required you to understand the software that was on them. And there wasn't any instructions. So as somebody just starting out, you didn't really get that much further along by using an image. You could build your own with limited knowledge of Linux, compile a few bits of software. That wasn't too difficult. The information for that was easy to find, but the configuration was still the problem.
Yeah.
And that's really where PiStar started. I had this almost revelation. I had discovered, quite by accident, interestingly, that Jonathan's source code, when you compiled it, not only compiled the GUI version of the applications, but it compiled a daemon version with no GUI. Right. And I'd not even realized the first couple of times when I was trying to use the software that the daemon version even existed. And I was playing around one day, and there was a light bulb moment when I just kind of went, I could do away with the GUI altogether, just not bother with it, run the daemons, and then I could write. Originally, the idea was to write a massive shell script that would bombard you with questions and then fill in the configuration.
Mm-hmm.
And I started working on this shell script, and it kind of overnight turned into an unwieldy behemoth that would crash at the slightest hint of you typing something unexpected into one of the answers. It was truly horrible. And I spent some time trying to figure out how I could solve this, what felt like an unsolvable problem. And it struck me that I can write PHP to do that, to present you with a question and to put the answer in a log file and sanitize the input. And I knew how to do that. And my PHP skills were significantly better than my Bash shell scripting skills were.
Right.
And it was, like a lightning bolt into my life. I just kind of looked at it and went, I know what I need to do. I'll throw the whole script in the bin and we'll do it with a web page.
Mm-hmm.
And the first version of the software had essentially most of the dashboard you see now actually comes from that software, or at least the look of it in the table layout with that information comes from that software. That's actually based on a dashboard written by Hans Barthen from Germany, DL5DI. So I borrowed heavily from his work. And he's actually credited on the bottom of each page because of the amount of work of his that I borrowed. So I borrowed his dashboard and then added the configuration tools around his dashboard. So that with a few mouse clicks and with a few forms filled in, it brought the system up. It was a revelation. And a few local hams used it, and their feedback was hilariously short. They said, well, it's okay. They weren't that impressed. And I think they weren't that impressed because they hadn't used anything else particularly. When you provide somebody with the obvious answer to a question that they've never asked, often the feedback is quite underwhelming, and it genuinely was back then.
Yeah, well, looking at your dashboard, and our listeners, if you haven't seen it, when you look at the PiStar dashboard, it looks pretty much the same as you would for configuring a standard internet router. The middle section's got the list of last 20 stations heard, and I'm looking at a D-Star gateway at the moment. D-Star on P25, this one. And there's traffic going through all the time. Lots of information down the left-hand side telling you what modes it's doing, the network status, whether the radio's in transmit, its frequencies. And, in fairness, it from what I'm seeing, looks very well laid out there, Andrew.
It's not bad, if I do say so myself. Although we'll get on to some of the fine points of the layout, because I'll need to mention at some point that the original version, although it had some of the same features, it had the last calls tables, certainly. It had quite a different look when you first saw it, didn't it, Adrian?
Oh, yes, it definitely did.
Yeah, Adrian actually stumbled into my software, and one of the first conversations we had was he said, you've got to change the way it looks. This is horrible. You have to make this look a bit more modern than it does. And I laughingly told Adrian back then, this project's finished. There's no possible way it needs any improvement whatsoever. Stick a fork in it, it's done.
Yeah. So it's Adrian's fault that he's given you lots and lots of extra work.
It's entirely Adrian's fault, actually.
Right.
And at this point, for the cricketers that are listening, Aussie, 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 yeah!
Well, why don't you speak about how you found it, Adrian, and some of the conversations we had in the beginning?
I was actually looking for some software that I could sort of work with somebody to, and I was originally looking at branding it for Brandmeister UK. Stumbled across EasyBM, which from memory is a German image, and it went pretty close, but it didn't quite cut the mustard, so to speak. So I started digging around and discovered Andy's PiStar, and thought, hang on a second, let's see if this guy is willing to do some coding and see if we can't come up with something that more closely to what I was looking at. And one thing led to another. He said yes. We started work on it, and at that stage we were just running with his name. And through conversations with quite a few people, I decided, no, hang on a second, PiStar is PiStar. Let's not change it. Let's keep it as PiStar. And what's developed from there to what you see now is not a complete project, Andy?
It's far from a complete project. In fact, every time that I think that I might actually get to the end of the to-do list, no, the to-do list grows exponentially every time that I think that I might get to the end of it. So I just stopped thinking that way.
So you're calling it a work in progress, but it's almost finished.
It's probably always going to be a work in progress, actually. PiStar is no longer just a software. We have an excellent community behind us. Adrian set up a Facebook group to help support people initially. The idea was that we would have a place to send people and say, come here, ask us questions. This is how you find out how to do stuff. And actually, that's by far one of the best decisions we could have made, because now we have a superb community that not only do they get in and help each other, but going through that process means that we see much more of the edge cases. We see more of the things that need improvement. And fundamentally, we see more of the things that people want. And it's an excellent way for us to interact with the end users on a large scale. And that, as a software development process, that's not only essential, but it's completely life-changing.
Well, I expect PiStar being your baby, you get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing the number of PiStar nodes out there and the number of downloads you've had of people working with them. And you were telling me about the feedback you get from your users.
Well, I pretty much say the same thing whenever people say to me, how does it feel to be where you are? With all the emphasis that I can place on it, it's a constant surprise to me that I'm not the only person in the world that wants to use this. As a software developer, it's very difficult to think that the thing that you've created is actually any good. Because if you do think that way, that means that you're at least on some level a bit arrogant. I did once think that the project was complete and there was nothing that needed doing. I've grown up since then. And I honestly do, I'm surprised when I see the number of people that want to use the software and want to help improve it and want to give us feedback. It's fabulous.
Well, that's good news. Now, when we were talking earlier, you were saying that you do this for the love of the hobby. You don't make any money out of it. You're like us at the podcast. You're doing it to put back into the community. But, must be quite a few people now that are working with you. And you're talking about some do give you donations of equipment and such.
Absolutely. I mean, I've never looked at ham radio as a way to make money. It's entirely a hobby, and I find it difficult to look at the way that some people treat the hobby, because they do treat it as a cash cow. That does happen, and I don't like the idea. So for me, this is a way for me to give something back for everybody to use. It's free now and always will be. That's never going to change. As you've alluded to, we do occasionally get donations for which we're extremely grateful. I've had both some modems that have come from people developing new modems. So the hardware that you would use with PiStar, we've had some of those. And that's very much a two-way street. We love the fact that developers send us their equipment. And in return, we make sure that it works with our software. So that's really a win-win, in both directions. Equally, I've recently been gifted a P25 radio. That was from W1MSG, Craig, over in the States. Again, great donation. We've gone from having, P25 works, but I couldn't really do much with it, to actually being able to make use of the mode myself. That's improved the dashboard. One of the unique features that we have is multimode RF remote control, so you can send commands to your Pi from your radio, and that's now supported on all four modes. That just works. So you can reboot your Pi, shut it down, whatever you see fit. In fact, I joked recently with one of the users on the Facebook group. He said, "That's amazing. Could you turn the kettle on?" I said, "If you have a kettle in the house that you can turn on, and you can write a script for it so that your Pi will turn it on, you can make that work with our remote control software. So yes, you can. From a radio command, you could start the kettle if you wanted to."
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, listen, I'm conscious of keeping you guys a fair amount of time, and as I said, it's going to be a long feature. But Andrew, well, both of you, if our listeners wanted to find out more about what you guys are doing, can you give them an update of websites and what to look for?
This is one of those moments where I'm pleased that I have a marketing director for these things, and I'll hand you over to Adrian.
Thank you, Andy. I was quite happy while you were talking. We do have a website. It's PiStar.uk. It's PISTAR.uk. And whilst that website's not totally complete yet, it also has links to our Facebook group, which is PiStar or Pi-Star User Support Group. If you put in the search engine PISTAR, it should come up with the page on Facebook. And even as we speak, and just let me have a quick bo peep, we have 1,221 users. I've authorised one whilst we've been recording this interview.
Right, that sounds good. And you once told me that I was actually one of those users.
You certainly are, Martin.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Adrian. And as I say,
it's quite all right.
Very, very interesting. So we've talked about this as a labour of love and going forward. Just wrapping up. Any plans for anything new, or if a new digital mode comes out, would you go with that? Try and add that in?
Oh, what a broad question. And the answer to that is very much it depends.
Yeah.
Because this is a labour of love, some things can be done very, very quickly. And other features and additions that take a large amount of time can take a very large amount of time. One of the things that surprises the Facebook group consistently is that we're able to do things very rapidly at the moment. The development process has been very rapid, but that's not always guaranteed to be that way. So it depends. If Jonathan adds a new feature to his already excellent software, a fine example of that is DMR Gateway. DMR Gateway is a recent feature addition. It allows you to have your DMR radio in your hand connecting to your hotspot running PiStar, and then rather than being associated with a single DMR network at that point, you can reach out and connect to Brandmeister DMR, DMR Plus, and also the XLX 950 master as well. So you can be connected to 3 different DMR networks at the same time. And that feature came within, what was it, Adrian, a matter of 2 or 3 days from somebody suggesting it to feature complete?
Something like that, yes.
So if the tools are there and it's a matter of integration, it's really quick. Some other features that have come along that kind of popped out of the blue, I mentioned the RF remote control. It's an idea that we'd been mulling over from some time. I'd got a kind of loose idea about how I would do that. It's a feature that existed previously in the D-Star software, also written by Jonathan. But the feature didn't exist in MMDVM. So MMDVM is the multi-mode digital voice modem platform. And MMDVM host is the software component that runs on the Pi.
Right.
That didn't have the RF remote control ability. And we managed to write a daemon that runs on the Pi if you enable it. You don't have to enable it, of course. It's a choice whether you want it on or not. And that's able to receive commands from your radio and then do things on the Pi. The most useful things, obviously, there's an RF kill switch for repeater keepers. So if their repeater's being abused, they can shut it down. There's a reboot. So if you think that your Pi is in some way misbehaving, you can tell it to reboot remotely. And you have some other features too. So you can shut the Pi down if that's what you want. So it's quite versatile. It has the standard features built in. It could be expanded to do other things. One of the really neat features is that when you do RF commands over D-Star, it actually answers you with a text message to tell you what it's going to do. Unfortunately, I can't do the same with DMR because the tools are not built into Jonathan's software to allow that, but they do exist in the D-Star software. So that's what we make use of.
Right. So all in all, sounds as though it's a very interesting product, and you guys have certainly opened my eyes to what's been going on. I know Adrian's been talking to me about this on and off for a few months, and we were just needing to get together to record this. So in fairness, guys, I'd like to say thank you very much to both of you for an excellent interview and getting our information out there. We will put your information in our show notes, so you may get emails if you wish to you, but we'll certainly put your website on our website. So I'd like to thank both of you, Andrew M0MWZ and Adrian M0GLJ.
Yeah,
and I think from
you.
both of us, I'd like to say a very warm 73s to everybody listening. And if you do want to ask anything, nothing is a stupid question. Come along and join the community.
That's great. 73.
73s, guys.
the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, certainly our feature there on PiStar is certainly a very hot topic at the moment, and there's a lot of people getting very interested in it there, so hopefully everyone got something from the feature there. And as I say, certainly try it out if you haven't done so already. You never know; it might be a new way of operating that you'll quite enjoy. Well, we always say the fact one of our biggest thrills of doing the podcast is to get feedback from our listeners, and a couple of interesting bits of feedback we've had in from the last episode. First one comes in from Misha LeBlanc, Victor Echo 9 Golf India Sierra, and Victor Echo 1 Golf India Sierra 2. And asking a question there, he's been told that using digital modes is hard on radios and that it's because they transmit continuously. He asks, is that true? And if not, then thanks. And if so, how can we reduce the risk, the heat risk to our radios by continuously transmitting? So what do you reckon, Dad?
Well, depends on which digital mode you're using. For digital voice, if you're using DMR, effectively the transmitter is being switched on and off every 30 milliseconds, because effectively there's two channels and it's time multiplexed. So effectively, it sounds silly, but you can almost double your battery life because you're only transmitting half the time, because it sends bursts of data, and you can have two people talking, independent conversations going on the same frequency, just different time slots via a repeater. So digital voice, no, that's not too much of a problem. Even the other system, which decides to split the channels into 6.5K channel slots, never a problem. I think where he's talking about is digital modes for like PSK and some of the others, where the duty cycle is quite high, and the radios weren't originally designed to do this. And often you do reduce the output power of your rig for some of the digital modes. And quite honestly, they're that efficient that you don't need to be running 100 watts plus. I've certainly had really good contacts running 5 watts on PSK. So I very rarely ever run more than 10 watts on PSK 31 and some of the other modes. So turn your power down. Digital voice, you're okay. Other digital modes, just turn the power down and protect your rig. That's probably the best advice I can give you.
Yep, I think that certainly answers the question there, and hopefully, as I say, that answers your question and helps you operate there on those digital modes. Next piece of feedback came back on the website from Bill, and he says he's been listening to episode 246. Good to hear about the Essex hams. I used them last year for my M6, and they were an excellent supplement to the training I received in my club in the Horndon district amateur radio club. Thank you for that report and another excellent podcast from Bill. So Dad, I certainly know that the guys at Exit Hams, they're always very hospitable towards us, and vice versa when we meet up with them at various rallies, and it's great to hear that they're doing their bit too about helping more foundation amateurs into the hobby.
They certainly are, and they're probably the biggest training operation for foundation licenses at the moment in the UK. So Shane Bill didn't give us his call sign or his surname, or it's not in the document anyway, but congratulations on getting your foundation bill, and as I say, we're pleased to have you on board as a listener.
Very true, very true. Right, come on, let's get this show wrapped up now, because we're going into a long one here, and we've got to be careful of these eardrums that we're looking at too. Guys, as always, we'd like you to consider us by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where you think you can send away, keeps our show advert free when you think this show's going to be in excess of probably about 100 minutes by the time it's all put together, and as I say, not one advert in sight. So I hope you appreciate that and continue to fund us and help us pay our bills. Be greatly appreciated. Make sure you check out the website, icqpodcast.com, where you got all your links, news, and that's constantly updated in the fortnight between shows. So keep yourself up to date with what's going on there. While you're there, join the email newsletter if you prefer your news delivered by email, and we'll pop you an email about every 3-4 days with the new updates to the website. You might be a Facebooker and you prefer your information by Facebook. and that's fine. We've got an ICQ podcast group there for you to check out. Our personal Twitter feeds at M1MRB and at Colin Butler. We'll give you also links to all the bits and pieces for you as well. Check us out on LinkedIn. And as we mentioned last episode, guys, just check your RSS feeds and make sure you have the official RSS feed pulling your podcast shows to you. You can check that out from the ICQ podcast website and go to download the show, and it will show you the official feed to make sure you have there for you to consider. We'd like to thank the guys who joined us on the round table: Chris Howard, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Rothwell, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan Romanchik, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed Durrant DD5 Lima Papa. Thanks for taking part. Thanks well for the guys from PiStar for the feature in this episode. And I think that just about rounds everything up, apart from, to remind you, it's a cup of tea and biscuit finding time, Smurf.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And most enjoyable. I mentioned you were over for the last few days. Most enjoyable having you over here. And as I say, now I'm going off to make the lovely Mrs. B a cup of tea and find her a bit.
Actually, talking about it, we better mention as well, we've got Hamfest in about 4 weeks. Which will be there. I'll be over for that, and Hamfest in 4 weeks, and potentially more stuff coming as well as we travel around and do bits and pieces for the show, guys. So we'll be at Hamfest, orange t-shirts at the ready, etc. in about 4 weeks' time in Newark-on-Trent, there in Nottinghamshire. So make sure you check us out. So no, quickly anyway. So look, that kettle's going to be going cold soon, so you better get off and make that cup of tea. Certainly will. So thanks for everything, guys, and we do certainly appreciate each and every one of your downloads. Listen, I'm now off to make Mrs. B a cup of tea, but don't forget, do it all again in a fortnight's time. 73. We sure will, guys. 73 is all. Bye-bye.